This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I talk with behavioural scientist Dr. Janice Presser. We talk about teamability, the two kinds of teaming, Myers-Briggs, and Millennial Training. Enjoy the episode. Hey, it's James Taylor. I'm delighted today to have Dr. Janice Presser. Dr. Presser is a Philadelphia-based behavioural scientist, CEO of the Gabriel Institute, and the architect of Teamability, a new technology that measures the analytics of team chemistry. A recognised thought leader in leadership and teamwork, she is the author of 6 books, including At Dr. Janice, Thoughts and Tweets on Leadership, Teamwork and Teamability. Her forthcoming book will explore the theoretical and physical foundations of teaming and the profound impact of teaming metrics on the structure, development and leadership of teams. And it's my pleasure to have her on the show today. So welcome onto the show.
I'm delighted to be here.
So share with our listeners, what's going on in your world just now?
Well, it's really exciting. Teamability is working in startups and mid-sized companies and is getting into some of the world's largest companies. That's really exciting because, you think about people wanting to create positive teamwork in smaller organizations, but when big organizations really understand the impact that it has, well, that means that there are no limits.
And you mentioned, where did the kernel of the idea of the teamability come from? Obviously, you have a long history in really kind of being a thought leader in this space, but the teamability specifically, and this kind of new business model that you're rolling out now, where did that originate?
Oh, well, it dates way back to a long time ago. I worked in healthcare, and that's where it really hit home. I'd been thinking about teaming and how important it was for a long time, but that's where I realized it can be life or death. Sometimes people come into the emergency room and you would swear they were going straight to the morgue, but somehow the doctors and the nurses come together and they save them. But there were also times when the reverse happened, and that really hit home that it wasn't just a matter of things being more enjoyable or being more productive or maybe even making a better profit, but that the life and death of people, or indeed the life and death of companies, could really be at stake, that people really are that important.
And do you think, having worked in this field for a while, do you sense that either within corporate America or within startups, there's a recognition now of the importance of teaming and how a team works together?
I think that people are starting to get that message, and they're starting to try to really understand it. But for most of them, they're still trying to understand it in the way that we were trying to understand it back, well, pretty much at that time of being in the hospital, kind of the mid-'80s. It's a long time ago. I've been working on this a long time.
But I suppose I was speaking at an event recently, and it was to judges and lawyers and advocates, and I was speaking specifically around creativity and talking about how the idea of creative genius has changed throughout the years. How in the early Greeks, Roman times, the idea was we were essentially vessels for genius. Genius kind of flowed through us came from nature, from a god or whatever your some kind of power, something. It came basically, we were just receptacles and vessels. And then in the Renaissance, a gentleman called Giorgio Vasari came up with a book called The Lives of the Artists, where suddenly he painted that the individual was the genius. Now, there's obviously lots of benefits to that in terms of, it's now easy to put people up on a pedestal if they're seen as a genius. But one of the downsides is it kind of negated the work of the team, all the apprentices, all the other people that were working in the workshops of these great artists as well. So when you're working in especially in corporate culture, Do you have to kind of battle sometimes to kind of get through that thing of maybe this is maybe a little bit more relevant in startups, where the startup founder is the one that's, is hailed, this amazing startup founder, when what you're focused on is really how the entire team works together?
Really, I mean, I'm the founder around here, and I'm the least important person at this point, So it really boils down to a difference in how you think about teams. And this was one of our challenges at the beginning, because the way we were thinking about teaming and the way other people were thinking about it really were two different things. So imagine there's really two kinds of teaming. The first one we'd call person to person. And that's kind of the standard thing that we do in regular life. We might meet each other networking, and you might say, oh, I know someone who could use your advice. And maybe I say to you, oh, there's a book, you've got to read it. And it's very transactional. It's much different when we think of the team as a living, breathing organism that's independent from any of us. And all of us want to contribute something to what that team needs. It changes the way that we interact. And it means that from the team's perspective, that no one person or no one way of giving is any more important than the other. It leads to the whole idea of leadership as a team sport. And it tends to work against the idea that we have the rock star ninja guru on our team and then all these other people.
And have you found any places where it feels like a very natural fit? It's been very easy, types of organizations or types of industries where they just kind of get that from the instinctive perspective. And have there been other types of industries where it's a little bit more of a challenge to sell that idea?
Well, since we are fairly small, if somebody's not interested, we pretty much move on. So it hasn't required convincing people. What it's required has been getting to someone who in their heart knows that there is a better way to do things. So, for instance, a very, very high up person in a very, very large global company said very simply, all I want to do is come to work and enjoy what I'm doing. And I want that for my people also. Now, the fact that he has thousands of people working in many different countries downstream doesn't make him fundamentally any different from the startup people who very often will say, I'm starting this up and I want to make sure that I have the right people with me, because it really, size doesn't matter. When we did the original validations on Teamability, I mean, one of the things that was important was to ask, does size matter? Does industry matter in the company, in the individual? Does race or does gender or even age or nationality, do those matter? And in fact, they don't. If you look at making a team of people who want to contribute to something bigger than themselves in a specific way, that the team actually needs, because, some sub-teams in very large organizations just don't need a founder kind of person. In fact, we would just get in the way. And if you can structure a team so that it has its needs met, you'll have a well-functioning team, and people will start to relax and just do what they enjoy. And that's quite wonderful. It's about your mission in life and achieving that.
And then what is the role in that sense of team and teamability for maybe things that have happened in the past where you've had like personality testing, like Myers-Briggs, where managers have looked to kind of put together teams that have different types of personality types, or maybe it's, Jungian type of things as well?
Right. We tried over many years at the beginning to make that happen. We looked at it because as behavioral scientists, my co-researcher and I had lots of experience with looking at what we finally started to think of as just components of people, a personality trait, an intelligence scale, things like that. In fact, if you want to really understand how people team together, psychology wasn't of any use at all, and personality tests are based in psychology. Teamability is actually based in physics and systems theory. So it is unique in its understanding of how people team together because we're actually looking at what's going on between people, while typical personality tests are looking at something that's going on inside someone. The other thing is having diversity is fine as long as that diversity is of ways of contributing to this bigger thing that we call the team.
So because you work with these different types of organizations, I think from startups to very large corporations as well, there seems to be kind of I hear conflicting things, especially around startups, where in the early stages of startups, when they're small, 1 to 10 person teams, certainly in Silicon Valley, there was this constant talk of actually you want people, instead of having people from lots of different types of people in an organization, you actually want people who are relatively similar in that organization at that early stage. So when it comes to your sense, you're basically not looking at it from a personality perspective. You're looking at it from a process and from a systems perspective. Can you talk a little bit more, like when you work with the client, how that works in reality?
Well, there's a whole operating system for teamwork, and there are two parts to it. One is, how does any one person contribute and fit into the organization? And this is true for a startup. That fundamentally doesn't matter. Startups have somewhat different needs. And in fact, people who are drawn to startups very often like to contribute in more than one way. We have years of research on people who are successful as the person who starts the organization. And they almost always will come with two important ways of contributing, what we call role with a capital R. One is that the very, very big picture vision of the future is the first thing that they imprint on their organization. But unless they have the ability to also move that vision, and they all have descriptive names, the roles, what we'd call a vision mover, which is exactly what it sounds like, then they're unlikely to actually get the organization off the ground. But that's not enough, because you have to have someone who isn't another mover of the vision like you. You need someone who'll take all those ideas and whatever it is that you output, new product, new anything, and will shape and form them in such a way that they'll become actionable. And so it's sort of a front end, back end of the same process. And then the same thing happens when you start to deploy what you have. So the people who are drawn to contribute in those different ways rarely do as well if you just assign them work based on, just randomly what you might think is important. The other thing is, if you have everyone who wants to contribute in exactly the same way, then you're going to have people fighting over who's in charge, and that doesn't play very well, especially in a startup. So it's exciting to have enough diversity in how people want to contribute and map that to what the team actually needs at any given time. There are two other things that are important, by the way. I didn't want to leave them out. One is coherence, that comes straight out of physics and has to do with the kind of work environment that you enjoy the most. What some people consider stressful, other people, like me, consider exciting. And so we're much more drawn to the uncertainty of the startup world, whereas people who are not like that would probably do better in a more stable kind of job that we excitement-seeking types might find boring. And then the third thing are the tens of thousands of different situations teaming characteristics that may or may not be important for one job, but are for another job, even within the same organization. And once you know that, then you can start to construct teams for the outcomes that you're looking for. You can create positive teamwork, and you can eliminate the friction that slows organizations down.
And then with the studies that you've done as well, and because obviously you will have the data to back this up. And I think it's really fascinating. I had a previous guest on who was explaining some things that are going on in terms of creativity from a neuroscience perspective. And what I found really fascinating about it was what he was saying was very similar to a lady that had written a book in the 70s, who had expressed some of these the ideas that he was expressing, but in a kind of touchy-feely way, not in a hard science way. And what was fascinating is he was kind of actually coming along and actually showing that there was proper evidence and an evidence base to support this as well. When you're going in and working with organizations where one of their prime things that they really want to focus on, they really want to see how they can best have their team work on, is around innovation, and especially creation of maybe new products and building up product lines and innovation as a leader within its industry. Have there been any things that you've found that work particularly well when it comes to teams, to making teams innovative, that you've discovered?
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes the most effective thing you can do is get the people who put the no in innovation, and there are plenty of them, out of the way. People are naturally creative when they're not told, don't do this. We all start out as very creative human beings. When we're children, ask children in kindergarten who's an artist, and they'll all pick their hands up. And by the time they get to the third grade, it will only be the few who haven't been able to give it up because they were discouraged. Lots of times, the brilliant ideas that our own employees come up with are poo-pooed, or people are given the idea that they have to damp that down. Don't talk about that because you might offend someone. So if we can have a more open environment for those who would be very inclined to come up with the creative next generation ideas, and just let them go with it and stop challenging them so much too early, then you can let people fully flower with the way in which they contribute. It's also important to not close off the creative team too quickly. To allow them to try things, sometimes to go down roads that you're pretty sure aren't going to be productive, because nothing teaches you how to be successful like a few beautifully placed failures.
Yeah. And that's interesting you say that, because I was just reading a book recently, Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, who is the founders of Pixar, and he was talking about and actually it's not, although it's kind of about creativity, actually really what it's about is managing people, the book. And it's very interesting because he talks about in that how to give feedback in a team context without crushing the idea. And one of the things you just mentioned there, well, you mentioned a couple of things. One was sometimes not giving feedback too early. And you also mentioned the idea of sometimes, even if you think an idea is completely wrong and it's never going to work, just to give it enough time to just kind of flourish a little bit, because maybe that kernel of the idea isn't the thing that actually happens. Maybe there's something that you can use from that as well. So I think that's very interesting. Just talking about the no in innovation and how that works in an organization. So what would you say, you're a scientist, but you're also a creative person in your own right, with coming up with frameworks and concepts and different things as well. What would you say are some of your biggest strengths and weaknesses as a creative person?
Well, strengths and weaknesses. I have plenty of the what people would think of as weaknesses, but I like to think of the most important thing as not so much strength and weakness, but the things that you live to do, the things that make you want to get out of bed in the morning and know that you can do them. And then the things that you don't do, because, people do best what they like best, and people like best what they do best. That's just how human beings are. The most important thing is to have other people on the team who do those things that you just don't do very well, and so you don't like them. And to be very careful to remember to thank them, to respect them, and to really appreciate them for doing those things. First of all, they're serving the same team you are. So that's a great reason. And the second reason to love them is that they're doing that stuff, and that means you don't have to do it. It's quite wonderful to have the technology to be able to identify people. And in fact, we use it even on our interns. And I just get to marvel at what they do, because even though they have no experience in the business world, in fact, they have a drive to produce and to give in a way that's so different from me. And once my eyes were open to it, and I realized how important that was, it just changed the way that we can do business here.
Something you mentioned there is interesting with interns, and I've got absolutely no data to back this up whatsoever. But it's just something that from managing people of different ages over the years, it seems to be that especially millennials, they're very interested in that know thyself. Whether that's in personality testing, in training, very, very. If you look at any of I have seen some data actually on this in relation to the reasons why millennials especially, will go and work for one employer over the other, and the ability to grow with an organization, to learn about themselves in an organization is like super high compared to some of the other generations as well. So when you were kind of architecting your team at Teamability, you were obviously very conscious of architecting that team in a certain way, so you had some of these different flavors, these different backgrounds in that organization.
Absolutely. And I agree. Millennials are talking about it more, they're demanding it more, but I think it's some of that is just because they refuse to take the no. They don't want to be held down. They're just more vocal about it. But, as a not quite a millennial, I've always said I'm 21, but in real years, I'm a little bit older than that. And it's just as important to me to have the ability to really be who you are, to really act on what feels like your mission in life. Is so important. It doesn't matter if your job is called a creative job or not. All jobs are creative when you're able to give what you have to give. And bravo to the millennials who are not only insisting on that, but are changing the way that we need to work with them. It was millennials that helped me figure out what my performance appraisal strategy is. Here's my performance appraisal strategy. You might like this. Feel free to use this in any company. So there's 3 questions for it. Question 1, are you doing enough of the things that you love? Question 2, are you doing too many of the things that you don't love? Question 3, what can we do together to change it? Now that's all performance appraisal should be, because the more people are doing things they are naturally inclined to do, the more fulfilled they feel, the less stress, so the less friction in the organization. It's simple physics, just what Teamability is built on, real hard science.
And in this creative journey you've had, can you tell our listeners about a time where you worked on a project, you gave it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it just didn't work out like you'd hoped? And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Well, in the beginning of this company, now I'll tell you that it took about 25 years to develop Teamability to the point it is at now. And it took 15 years to decide what was needed. And then the first 10 years of this company to be able to develop the technology that I architected, not because I'm a bad architect, but just very complex. It doesn't work like other things. So at the beginning, I needed to partner with somebody who had kind of the business background of it, which I had some of it, but you can't serve two masters. You can't concentrate on both the development of the creative part and also the business. And unfortunately, I partnered with someone who had a very different idea of where we should go. Now, that was before the technology was developed enough for me to use it, or I would have been able to predict that. And so I then was able to go on and use Teamability to identify an amazing person. I knew I wanted somebody who had worked in the world of technology, preferably in an entrepreneurial type of organization. And what happened was I actually found the right person who had the right background, but also contributed not in the way that I did, but in the complementary way. So, while I could spit out lots and lots of ideas and words and product ideas, at this point, it's extremely useful to have the man who is now president of our company, Mark Talbot, hats off to him, who is my vision former and takes everything that I come out with and transforms it into things that are actionable, real product and all of the things that are required by the business.
It reminds me a little bit. I've just finished reading a book on Edward de Bono, and in the late 70s, early 80s, he started. I think it was called the School of Thinking. Yes, the school that started initially. And it was actually, if you do the reading into it, it was a gentleman whose name I've forgotten now, who's Australian, who lived in America, who was really the kind of business person behind that. And, De Bono really kind of came in with the ideas, great, visionary, and had some great things as an academic as well. But he needed someone else there as a foil. Almost like as we talk in music about creative pairs, where you'll have Lennon and McCartney. Why do you have these creative pairs all the time as well? And it just got me thinking as you were talking there, having worked in Silicon Valley, I was wondering, have you started using some of the Teamability not with just to help maybe companies find the right employees or the right the teams, but also for startups to ensure that they are bringing on board the right investors and VCs in their companies?
Absolutely, yes. And when you're doing a startup, everyone is part of your team. They used to refer to that as your kitchen cabinet, the people who you invited in for coffee to just give you some advice. And so your team in a startup includes everyone who's advising you. That may be your domestic partner. That may be an attorney or an accountant who advises you on specific things that you may have thought you picked because they have the job of being an accountant or an attorney or something that sounds useful. But when you think about what the best advice is that they give you, it almost always is because they are your natural role partner, the one who naturally can take what you do and make it better.
So let's talk about yourself again. Tell us about in this journey you've had as a behavioral scientist, as a writer, as a leader, as an architect of Teamability as well. On this journey you've had, can you tell us about any insights or light bulb moments in your own life where you've come to a point in your life and you said, okay, this is a decision I need to be making, or this is a new distinction I formed. It's that point where you've just had that kind of eureka moment in your own life.
Oh my God, there have been so many of them. I mean, the real one, I think, was when I really realized that I needed the right person the first right person on the team. And then when the realization came that we were ready for the next one, I mean, the time when I realized that teaming was life or death, I guess that was really my biggest light bulb moment. But I think on a good day, I have a few of them, and they all have to do with, a new understanding of, oh, okay, I thought it meant this, and this is really so much bigger. It's exposure to as many people and ideas, books also. And funny, but I have De Bono's Thinking Course sitting right on my small bookshelf. It is a wonderful book, all exposing yourself to everything that's out there, whether it's marketplace information or just hanging out at the coffee shop with other people who are in your type of creative life or maybe a different one, there's always learning in that if you're open to it. So the light bulbs are all around. Just start plugging them in.
They're popping all the time. And do you have any online resources or tools or apps like Evernote that you love to use?
Oh, I adore Evernote because it follows me from place to place. The laptop, the desktop, even my phone, although they're small to read on, my beloved iPad Mini that is usually not far from me when I'm not in the office, and I love Quora. Because it's that's a website. Can we count that?
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful online resource for two reasons. One, you can ask anything, and there are so many people who are so willing to contribute. And the other thing is, when people ask me questions, just the exercise of answering them, it's like, I think of it as Zumba for the brain, and it just gets things rolling, sometimes in ways that I'm sure the questioner never intended. But it's those unintended consequences that make for a rich life.
I mean, writing in general is just such a great way of organizing your thoughts as well, and just kind of and Quora is a great tool. So we'll put all these on the show notes. People go to jamestaylor.me and just look for this episode. You'll be able to get all these in the show notes. So we were talking about books just a minute ago there, and if you could recommend just one book to our listeners and one record or album to our listeners, what would they be?
Oh, the record is easy. It's my theme song, Born to Be Wild. Steppenwolf,
Yeah.
Well, it's just think about it. That's the entrepreneur's theme song. Book, well, I'm going to be tempted to say my last book at Dr. Janice, but let's say anything by Ogden Nash. The world needs to laugh more. If you're not familiar with Ogden Nash, he writes funny, brief poems, and I think is no longer with us. But the books are all over the place. They're in the library. You can look it up on the internet. We need to laugh more, and sometimes I think we take books, even mine, too seriously.
We'll definitely put those on the show. Put some links there as well. So let's imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you have the tools of your trade and the knowledge that you've acquired over these years in doing what you do, but you have no contacts, no one knows who you are. How would you restart things?
I just start building Teamability again. I mean, I found my meaning in life. Why would I ever change it?
Well, that's actually one of the nicest answers to that question I think I've ever had as well. That you're obviously doing you're doing what you were meant for. You found your mission, which is fantastic. Final question there. Let's share with our guests the best ways that they can connect with you, learn more about Teamability and your writing and the other projects you have going on.
Wow. Well, teamability.com and it's just Teamability, and as one word.com, will forward you now to the Gabriel Institute.com. That's our main website. But I'm at Dr. Janice, Dr. Janice, on Twitter. You can find me on Quora, LinkedIn, Facebook, lots of places. And we love to hear from people. I do a monthly webinar with our people here. That's an introduction. If people are interested in being users, or we partner with consultants globally, so wherever people are. I just love hearing from people. So we're pretty easy to find. If you can't find a better way, I'm Dr. Janice at thegabrielinstitute.com, and I think you can even link that off of our website.
Absolutely. We'll put all these show links at jamestaylor.me as well, so be able to get all of those links as well. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I wish you all the best with Teamability, all the great work that you're doing just now, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thanks, James. It was a delight.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.